Greetings, Regional Modernism students. I hope this finds you well. This is Dan Seidel. I'll be leading you on our 8-week journey through the winding ways of this course. I want to take an opportunity to introduce myself, to give you a sense of how we're going to proceed over the next 8 weeks. I'm an art historian, curator, art critic. I've spent 25 years following the trail of modern contemporary art. I'm interested in what can be said about a work of art, how we interpret works of art, how we experience them. My doctoral dissertation focused on abstract expressionism, focused on the critical reception of abstract expressionism. That is, how critics and curators experienced the work, interpreted the work, not only in the contemporary situation, in the context in which they were made, but also subsequent generations of interpreters and viewers and curators. So I'm very much interested in what happens when one experiences a work of art. This is the first time I've taught this class, and of the courses in this program, I find this course to be the most enigmatic. It is a course that seems to cut through and engage aspects, bits and pieces of all the courses in this curriculum. In some ways similar to the methodologies course, which I just finished teaching for the first time, and some of you who are watching this have just experienced that 8-week spelunking exercise into the deep caverns of art history as an academic discipline, and the methodological challenges that it poses. But this idea of regional modernism is a complex one, and I have to be honest with you guys. I'm feeling as if I am building the plane in the air. So it will be a week by week thing. I'm working on the syllabus. I should have the syllabus to you early next week, hopefully on Monday afternoon. Today's Sunday as I'm taping, so tomorrow afternoon. I'm still trying to figure out how I want to be able to shape this in the way that relies upon my strengths, and also will enable you to make the best use of it in the context of your program. But what I want to do, other than offering a caveat to the fact that this class will feel like it'll feel like a weekly invention, which it will be. I trust that the fact that it will be it'll be an 8-week improvisation will yield really interesting insights and results for you. And I'm hoping that it can be a rich experience for you, as I'm hoping that it's a rich experience for me. The stakes are high for me. I want to learn something in these 8 weeks. And for those of you that have had me before, you've heard me tell you, or I've read in the emails that I've sent you, that I teach for my own purposes. It's all well and good for me to give knowledge to you and educate you, but truly what I'm ultimately interested in is my own education and my own process of learning and discovering, and teaching is a way for me to do that. And I also think that the best education occurs in that context in which the teacher and the instructor has something at stake in it, that he or she is actively searching for something that only the classroom and only the context of an 8-week online graduate program can offer. And so I've put all my eggs in that basket, and I'm trusting that 8 weeks later that there will be something significant out of our time together as we engage this question. And the question is regional modernism, which is an oxymoron. It modernism itself emerges in the context, in the wake of the Enlightenment, and in the context of internationalism, in the context of stripping away the kind of nationalities and the parochial jealousies of locale and region that gave birth in many ways to the tribalism, to the religious wars, bigotry, intolerance. All of those aspects are bound up in a traditional, could say, medieval Christendom that the Enlightenment was interested in obliterating, because it experienced the bloodshed of the wars of religion, in which geography determined what church one was going to be in and what confession one had to make to remain an active member in that community, or to stay alive, in fact. And so, in building it, in building modernism, building a modern world on reason, something that would be universal, something that isn't defined and possessed by a nation. And yet what regionalism is all about is about the locale. It's about a particular place. It's about a situatedness, not the universal subject, as Kant would say, but the grounded person in a particular neighborhood, in a particular county, in a particular state in the United States, or a particular province in France at a particular time. And so what we need to be doing is looking at regionalism and modernism as a dialectic, as something that will help us get a certain sense of modernity and modernism, the international component of modernity. You could say the ethics and the morality of it, and also its immorality and its dehumanization, and what regionalism can offer in terms of returning a certain kind of corporal embodiment to, in our cases, we're looking at artistic practice. What does it mean to be an artist, not just in the 19th century, but in 1856 in the Hudson River Valley? And that opens up onto a whole host of other embodied issues. Identity, sexuality, gender, economic situation. All of those aspects play particular roles. So in my focus as a doctoral student, and what I was trained in as a modernist, was abstract expressionism, New York school painting. Painters, mostly male painters, painting not just in New York City in the 1940s and 1950s, but in a particular neighborhood in New York City, with a certain geographical context in which artists would conceive of themselves as either uptowners or downtowners, predicated upon the 10th Street boundary. Those artists that were working in downtown area, Jackson Pollock, Franz Klein, and Willem de Kooning, and then those painters working uptown, working further north. Not that further north. Both the uptowners and downtowners were marginalized in the art world in the 1940s and into the 1950s. But the uptowners were Mark Rothko, Barnett Newman, Clifford Still. And so in this class, I will trot out and focus on various case studies that will draw our attention to this dynamic, this dialectic of a regional modernism. Now, certainly this phrase has its origins in architecture, and we'll look at architecture, but we won't look at it we won't look at it as the overarching component. We'll look at it in many ways as a metaphor. Architecture can't be moved. You're kind of left with what you got at a particular place. And so architecture is nothing if not local. But what does it communicate in that locale? Can it communicate universal? Can it transcend the local? How does it celebrate and how does it transcend the local? How does the work of art make use of the local and offer something beyond the local? For example, how can a French painter working on the outskirts of Paris in the 1890s, like Paul Cézanne, make a painting that can have such an impact on a person like me, a male, American, graduate student in New York City in the late 1980s, early 1990s, who sees this painting and is moved in ways that I'm still dealing with and working through. How does that happen? How does that locale, how does that strange, marginalized artist working on the outskirts of the Parisian art world, literally in the geographical outskirts, sitting in the French countryside and painting trees and landscapes, how does that locale impact me and my locale? So I want us to be thinking about that, and architecture will be one of those metaphors from which we'll be able to look at the groundedness, and also how that groundedness is managed and shaped and also transcended. Another aspect of the locale of regionalism, we'll be looking through historic regionalism, American regionalism, looking at artists like Thomas Hart Benton, John Stewart Curry, Grant Wood, artists that I, as a Midwesterner growing up in Nebraska, had plenty of opportunity to see in Nebraska and Iowa and Kansas. These artists were reacting to, in many ways, in a quite conservative way, nationalistic way, to the Frenchified, Francophile, international modernism that was dominant in the New York art world. And these artists were interested in getting back to a traditional way of looking at the visual arts, and a way that was located in what would be called flyover country. And I think it's in our political environment, at this volatile, fragile, vulnerable political environment in which we are in the midst of kindling being set up, and waiting for that spark that will ignite this war between tribes. Looking at regionalism and modernism, looking at this period in the 1930s will be very important, I think, and relevant to us. I'm also interested in this notion of a lost place, of exile, an artist that I've worked with over 20 years. He's an LA-based artist, Enrique Martinez Celaya, an artist that I've collaborated on with curatorial and publishing projects for 2 decades. He's a Cuban exile, born in Cuba. His family fled Cuba to Spain, Barcelona and Madrid. Then they immigrated to Puerto Rico, and then he came to the United States for college. How he understands himself and where he is from, and this notion of exile and displacement has been a very important theme in his writing and in his work. And we will look at that, and we will spend some time working through his writings, looking at his work, how he's understanding this complicated notion of exile, of a homelessness, of displacement. Because part of the dialectic of regionalism and modernism, of regional modernism, is not only the locale that one has, but the locale that one has lost, the homelessness that in many ways we all, in an increasingly mobile society, have lost, and particularly in a context in which we're communicating at this very moment. I'm in a condo on the ocean in South Florida, and you are any place else in the world. And how we negotiate that distance and how our experience together would be different if we were in a classroom. Which, of course, is something that I would desperately want. But then we try to figure out ways to negotiate that. So how can presence, how can a feeling of intimacy, of interaction, of communication be engaged if we're not able to have that classroom experience? If we're not able to have that interaction around a cafe or a coffee house in which the New York painters in the 1940s and 50s gathered, that they could gain communal sustenance. So how is it that we do community? How do the visual arts help us in affirming that? And also emphasizing the fact that those communities cannot turn into idols. They cannot be idolized. They cannot turn into means by which it is us against them. How can it be us in a universal way that is negotiated in the local way? And again, we'll talk about this idea of the local and the global, the glocal as it's called, or whatever, and also how the problematics of that, of thinking about that in too slick or too trite a way, only serves the purposes of a dark, globalized flattening of experience. And we'll look at certain artists also who venture forth into various places and are influenced by those places. Marsden Hartley painting in Maine, painting the landscapes in Maine. Georgia O'Keeffe going to Santa Fe. The artists making work in New York City. And also what's relevant, I spent 11 years as the chief curator of a university art museum in the Midwest at the University of Nebraska, the Sheldon Museum, which had a national collection. Its collection, a very strong collection of 19th and 20th century American art. And yet its identity was also shaped by its locale, the fact that it was in Lincoln, Nebraska, that it was on the campus of the University of Nebraska, that its collection was predicated upon the local collectors and what they were capable of collecting. The collection was established in the last quarter of the 19th century. Those collectors, the wealthy in Nebraska, didn't have the resources to buy European Impressionist paintings. They had the resources to buy American paintings, and so that's what they bought. And the museum is a product of, is a testimony of, is a monument to the local. And yet, it's a museum that is predicated upon the national. It's a museum that the physical museum is modeled after, or it was designed by Philip Johnson, who was a curator of architecture and design at the Museum of Modern Art. It's modeled after the Lincoln Center. It is nothing if not an attempt to transcend a kind of rural Nebraskan mindset and to move into a world of international culture embodied by New York. So all these issues of the local and the national and the international and the universal are issues that we'll be dealing with. But I also, what is crucial is for you to be thinking about how regional modernism and what we will be talking about over these weeks affects you. How your experience with art is predicated upon your local experience. And what are those artists operating in your region? And how are they in conversation with broader conversations with artists around the world? And what are those those traditions also, those creative traditions that are not in conversation internationally? Those creative traditions I would call folk traditions. They are perfectly content to cultivate a tradition in a particular locale. Handed down generation by generation through individual contact, not through theory, not through books, but through interpersonal contact, through apprenticeship often. And we'll spend some time, I think, looking at the folk tradition and what that can teach us about locality. And how can we respect and understand where we are located where we are, and how that interacts with where we've come from or what we've lost, that gnawing displacement, that sense of displacement that we feel. Herman Melville said as moderns that we are orphaned, and that the only place we're going to find the answer is our lost parentage, and our lost parents are long dead. So it's to the grave that we go, searching for home. And how do we understand that from a theological perspective or from a religious perspective? Where is home? We can follow Steinbeck in the book of Genesis, that we live east of Eden. We're wanderers, being called out of a certain land like Abraham, being called to a certain promised land somewhere in the future. And all along the way, we're making particular stops, engaging and being interacted with by particular people. And it seems to me the arts, the visual arts and the poetic arts and all the other arts are means by which those experiences are creatively embodied in significant ways. It's a lot of stuff to think about. And as I'm talking to you about this, I'm getting really excited about the time that we'll spend together. So again, I want to apologize for the ramshackle status of this class, that it's not shiny and the knobs all buffered and waiting for you on canvas, that this is going to be kind of one of those things where I put the key in the ignition, we all climb in, and it's going to take me a little while to pump the gas and get this car going. I may need a mechanic in the car to get out and help me get it going, but we'll get it going. And I promise you there'll be some really interesting stops along the way. And so I beg your patience, but let's get ready to rock and roll starting tomorrow. I'll write you another email that will introduce our week 1. My hope is that I'll have the syllabus there. I also want you to know that I respect the heck out of you guys, that you guys are taking these classes, that you are doing this on your own time, that you have adult things to do, you have families, you have jobs, exhausting lives, and that yet you're doing this. I respect it, and I am very flexible, and I want you to know that that if life hits you, just let me know. The readings are demanding. The readings there'll be a lot of things. I'll be throwing a lot of things at you, but not forcing you to have to read them on a weekly basis or even in the context of the course. I'm feeding your library. I want you to be able to utilize these resources ongoing in your programs or in the classes that you teach or whatever you do. And so please, I am, let me know if there are any problems. Again, what will be required of you will be a midterm writing exercise. There'll be a final paper. That's really what I want you to be focusing on. And along the way, we'll have our weekly conversations, weekly discussion prompts. I'll be sending you emails. You'll be responding to me. Right now, it seems to me that the most important thing that I can offer you is detailed responses to each of your discussion prompts. If I can get things working in a way that is manageable on Canvas so that you guys can respond to each other's, that's great. I'm not going to grade you on that. And you do the work, you'll get the grade. Let's be honest here. I don't care about grades, and I've never cared about grades. What I care about is conversion. I want you to come out of this 8-week process a different person, thinking differently about the world of art and art history and regional modernism. That's what I'm interested in. So I'm looking forward to it. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Bye-bye.